everybody. Great to have you here. My name is Kai. I'm your moderator of this session. I'm very happy to moderate the session as carbon reduction is the very core of the fight against climate crisis. And the goal of all today is to clarify the idea of effective carbon emission, of effective reduction of carbon emissions, and how it can be implemented. But also, I try to have a look into what a truly regenerative economy and society could look like in the future. Let us just take a step ahead. Let's say 2015, and look back. We did things right. How did we get there? And then we know the steps that we have to take. And there's no one who could inspire us better how to do this than Lou Miller. Lou Miller is doing the keynote here. Please come on stage. And certainly you know much better than I how to do this. When I first met you, you gave a very short keynote before some, 12 entrepreneurs. And after this keynote, all of them wanted to be impact entrepreneurs. So now please do this to the world.
With pleasure. A few years back, I was at an event and someone told me that magic is the science of everything that we have not been able to explain. I contemplated a lot of this and actually started realizing that this is absolutely true. For this guy, it was magic to be able to build tools. To be able to build tools with which he or she can explore its surroundings, access more resources, protect himself, and be ultimately able to build this new version of the reality in which he entered. As we had all these tools, we then moved into making sure that the resources that we were extracting were tangible for others. We were able to exchange them, and we were able to package them, and we were able to put them in the hands of those that were maybe far away from where the resource actually was found. With the Industrial Revolution, we scaled this up further. Sure, beforehand we were able to access a lot of resources, but we were not able to really predict how others were going to look into particular products. The Industrial Revolution added to us this opportunity and gave us the chance to see ourselves as entrepreneurs at scale. And finally came commodity trading. This was the moment when raw materials, natural resources, were allowing us to think of ourselves as value creators, as those that can contribute to an economy that was shaping and building itself in one place to then be delivered in another. And that is the moment when Earth went for sale. After we kicked off this commodity trading, we were able to increase emissions at a level that was unpredicted, but also one that was definitely correlated to the events which we were experiencing. War, a lot of connectivity between people, and a lot of wish for prosperity that was heavily dependent on money. After the war happened, and that was not only a war between nations, but also war for resources, war for access to certain natural lands, society started searching for stability and security that was definitely still connected to this material need that was eliminated during the times of instability. And that was money. People had starved minds, starved bodies and hearts, and wanted to find a way in which they can find stability. And the easiest way they can secure this was by tapping into as many resources as possible. And this is kind of where it all went wrong. Our forests became timber, our cows became cattle, our lands became monocultures. While we were delivering all these commodities around the world and making humanity prosperous, inequality grew, the resources of our planet were being depleted and going beyond what the planet was able to absorb. And the cost for that was also increasing. In the typical, well understood from our stance, we were paying the price for the choices that we were making on a daily basis. The ecosystem was not able to take this, and statistics were starting to prove that there was a lot of actions that we were taking that had no correlation to how our planet was feeling. And to get even further than that, we even found ourselves with waste in our body. To get to the final moment where our ecosystem decided to stop working together with us. The math simply doesn't work. Our economic model does not suffice for what our planet can offer and how we build our society. Even though we might have been feeling like there's been a lot of prosperity over the last few years, the truth is that the economy has been stagnating, and this is not since yesterday, more today than ever. And the reason for this is that the KPIs that we're using today, like GDP, growth, any kind of margins and profits, really don't make sense because we are missing a key layer to the analysis of what it takes for us to have a very comfortable life and for us to build prosperous businesses. Take a moment here. I know this is a lot of information, and I know that this is a lot of data that many of us feel concerned about on a daily basis. But the truth is that as much as we seemingly are concerned, all of this is continuing to accumulate as actions, and it's giving us very little window of opportunity to be able to respond. Which makes me feel like it's kind of a shame that we have an educated, most educated crowd that we've ever seen in our lives, which is not understanding the necessity to be in equilibrium with our ecosystem. It is also a shame because we have been continuously increasing wealth, but is this the wealth that is properly calculated? Is it actually aligned to what really has been taking our planet to be able to suffice the lifestyle that we've been offering to ourselves? And isn't it also a shame that, as all of us good leaders, how we haven't understood the one thing that we need to know, which is that nature is the one entity we should not be managing. My climate change journey started on a beach like this. I was supposed to be surfing in Morocco, did not happen, ended up cleaning beaches, and what came out of this was a year of exploration where I became obsessed with climate change. I couldn't think of anything else. I was spending all my free time on this to find myself 6 years down the line with a company that is supporting corporates on reducing their emissions. The pain that people have been going through for climate change goes a lot beyond what maybe the KPIs and the statistics that I showed can offer. And with this in mind, we have the responsibility to know and use what we know to be part of the solution. Throughout these years, I've been learning a lot of different lessons, and many of them are applicable to the growth of our economy. We work with thousands of businesses, and what they have been seeking is a transparent way of understanding themselves as change makers. However, this is not easy in the current ecosystem that we have, because our economy is understanding the mathematics in a different way. Lesson number one, the economy doesn't mean anything if we don't calculate climate risk. At the moment, there's an amount of capital expenditure that is not included in the balance sheets of businesses. And what this means is that the unintended costs associated to the impacts on infrastructure, the unintended costs related to human loss, or just the lack of preparedness of businesses is not accounted for. And in the day-to-day in which we make sure that our business continues to grow and continues to develop, we just don't have visibility on this. The progress that we consider to be related to success at the moment is predominantly defined by money. But in the context of climate change, this is not applicable because we have an ecosystem that is in collapse, that is unable to sustain itself, and is in dire need to focus on accumulated progress for all of us, a society that thinks of itself as a change maker, rather than one entity, one company, one nation. The fact that we have leaders all across Europe, all across the US, setting the scene for how sustainability is thought about, doesn't mean a thing if we don't involve every single other continent along the way. The fact that we have industries that are leading the way in the way they think about sustainability doesn't mean a thing until all the other industries don't find themselves in the position of thinking of the future in a responsible for the next generation's manner. Climate change is not one issue. It's a collection of many issues. It is related to waste management. It is related to the increase of emissions because of deforestation. It is related to the fact that we're not able to use our resources in an efficient manner. And with this in mind, we need to think in a complex way about our ecosystem, where we consider the domino effects associated to every single action that we take. If you cut a tree in Madagascar, you're removing the living place of a lemur. The lemur then gets sold on a black market to be offered as a pet. And then you kill an ecosystem that is heavily dependent on this particular species. The examples like that are extensive, and there's so many, allowing us to see that every single little action that we take as a business matters a lot. And it doesn't matter only on the board level, it matters on an employee level, customer level, and on any level where we can have impact and emphasis on the communities that we can connect with. And last but not least, we need to think about collaboration over competition. In the normal economic model, we've been all thinking that the loss of someone is the win of another. This is not the case when we talk about climate change. We have no opportunity and no timeline where we can allow for one company to emerge versus another. The fact that one automotive is leading the way for their whole industry allows for the whole industry to make a lot of progress. The fact that one employee is pushing the agenda for a whole company means that the whole company stands a better chance of becoming a sustainability pioneer. And with this in mind, we need to start thinking about the opportunity that each one of us has to support one another. 2 years back, we built a community called the Green Tech Alliance, where we have more than 2,000 businesses addressing different challenges related to climate change. There's more than 20 companies building a solution very similar to my company, Plan A. But the reason why we welcome them is because we know that there is not enough time, there is not enough space for us to start thinking in world domination kind of manner. We need to support every solution to be able to scale. And where this leaves us is back to magic. All of you here have chosen to be at this event with the deep knowledge and concern for where our planet, our economy is headed. And today, we have, unfortunately, a very uncomfortable realization of the instability of our economy due to energy prices, due to energy discomforts that we see extensively on a daily basis, but ultimately due to the fact that our economy has not been doing the math properly. And as we start thinking about the magic we want to be doing, I would like to invite you to join me into focusing on creating magic for our planet and for the rebuild of a sustainable economy like the one we all dream of. Thank you.
Wow, many inspirations here. I have been very touched by this point that you mentioned, collaboration over competition. This is a core point. And working with startups for a long time, I have found that unicorn is not the right expression. Zebras fix what unicorn break. You should look that up. There's a nice article in this. And that's where we get to our panel discussion here. I would like to invite those that tackle these problems in different ways. Please come on stage. So, take a seat. So I welcome, to my right is Adrien Aurel-Barres, Chief Sustainability Officer of La Banque Postale. Adrien is in charge of transforming this Dino in a sort of 100% purpose-led company. Thank you, Adrien. Then we have Antonio Wilms. He's a strategy consultant, and he is working with utilities, and tell us one more, on their goals. The vision is accelerating climate action through working culture. And then we have Piotr for Leaders for Climate Action. And when I say Tono is a little bit the bottom-up approach, that every single one of us is an actor in this change, then you have the top-down approach, enable those that are leaders and might be a little bit lost. What should we do? Then you try and find solutions. We will touch that in a minute. So first of all, what I took away from this keynote that we heard, many things, but lesson number one, what was a little bit what I wanted to touch with you. What the hell is a regenerative balance sheet? How can we get there, right? And that's also why I said, okay, let's look in the future when we are there. And we have some visionaries here to tell us a bit more on that. So the first word goes to Adrien. And please tell a bit more what you're doing in the Banque Postale and how you define a vision for a big corporate.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be on this panel after this very inspiring speech. Maybe just a forward about La Banque Postale, because we're like the sixth bank in France, but we're a little bit different from our competitors because basically we have a very strong territorial presence due to a network of our parent company, which is the French Postal Group. So that's the first big difference. And the second difference is that a couple of years after the La Banque Postale was created, we were given by the government a public mission of banking accessibility, meaning that we allow to 1.5 million clients to use a saving account as a first banking account so that they can withdraw money and receive some social benefits on these saving accounts. So we're talking about people that would be totally excluded from the banking system otherwise, such as like migrant people, homeless people, and it's like 1.5 million clients. So with this really like sustainability in our DNA, we decided as our parent company La Poste to become a mission-led company, purpose-led company back in February. And this is also maybe our way of answering the different challenges that Le Brunina highlighted. This status of mission-led company is very demanding. First, because it's a change in terms of governance. So really the top management commit to a couple of objectives and to a specific missions that is written in the legal status of the company. So it's a big governance change. And then the second thing that is very important in this status is that it's externally audited. So first we have like a steering committee made of external experts that really help us in our journey and give us advice in how we need to continue creating an impact. And also this status will be validated by an external auditor. And so maybe we could lose it if we don't achieve the different objectives and KPIs that we have set up.
Right, I would like to dive into this a little bit deeper about how to transform and how to change and how to adapt, because you certainly do mistakes. I want to hear about that later, because that might educate others not to do the same mistakes. But coming to your activity, Toto, if you're touching the intrinsic motivation of each single person. Please tell us a bit, how do you define your mission, and who are you working with, and what are you aiming at? What is your vision?
Thank you very much. I think it's great that you introduced me as a former job as a strategy consultant, where I realized what's something very important, that culture eats strategy for breakfast, which means we've been developing so many strategies which were just not properly being able to be implemented because the work culture wasn't right. And that's when I realized that we will never be able to achieve all of these amazing goals that we have quickly enough if we don't get everyone on board. So our vision is to make work cultures climate friendly, and we work essentially with all kinds of big corporations in order to help them to efficiently engage and reward all of their employees into climate action, very specifically to their requirements, so that they can actively participate in achieving these goals quickly enough. Because, as Lubomila very rightly said, we don't have a lot of time, so strategy will only help as much to set the directive, and that's super important. But now we have to get everyone on board to achieve these goals.
Let's stick to that for a minute. Give us an example. I get it, totally, but how?
So the very simple thing is that in the beginning it starts with awareness, right? So if you have all of these goals but no one knows about them, how are you expecting anyone to act on them, right? So if you don't, so in our very specific case, we start in many cases by just engaging employees to work together to learn about what they can do in the workplace that affects the carbon emissions of the workplace. So there's many things that employees' behaviors create as emissions that the company is responsible for in their carbon accounting. So the way that they commute to work, the way that they use energy at work, the way that they do business travel, and many of the decisions that they make on a daily basis have tremendous impact on the carbon accounts of the company. So through our programs, we discuss with our clients what are the requirements, and we focus and enable the participants through behavior design. So really learning how can they take an active role in this, to collaborate and to achieve challenges together that help reduce the emissions.
I very much subscribe to that. I still have a doubt. Do you, or how? Let's say how do you allow for changes in the goals of the specific person? Because to change behavior, the goals must change, and these are not goals that can be defined top down. They have to come bottom up somehow, right? For example, I'm going to travel by train from now on. Okay, so that has to be organized in a different way. And me, as an employee, I'm setting this goal. Hey, I'm going to offset my carbon. I won't take the plane. And then my boss comes and says, "Hey, but you have to be at 2 p.m. in Paris." This is a cultural change for the company, and we come right to you, because that means what the leaders are doing. Is this the case? Are the companies, because that is a hint to all those that might be listening, are the companies, do they have to open up to very different set of goals that is sort of brought up bottom up?
I mean, the more they do, the more effective the cultural transformation is. If they don't allow this to happen, they just throw an objective against it, and anything what you do at the employees, they achieve this, but they don't give them the means to achieve it, then it's going to be very hard, obviously. So it has to be taken seriously, it has to be done entirely throughout the organization, and all of the levers have to be put in the right place, and then a lot can happen. And I think the most important thing is to measure the impact of everything you do, and then you can see what worked, what didn't work, then you iterate, then you redo, I mean, that's the mentality anyways nowadays. We have to learn quickly from our failures and see, but if you don't make it measurable, and if you don't have the campaigns to try it out, then we can't proceed.
All right. So I would hand this over to you, just to dig a little bit into that, because I've got the question in mind. When I hear this, that we naturally transform, I'm an entrepreneur myself, I know that I can't define all my goals all the time. They surprise me sometimes, and outcomes surprise me even more, right? So doesn't this mean that we sometimes have to say goodbye to a very strict set of KPIs and re-evaluate all the time? And how do those you are working with handle this?
Good afternoon. After everyone, we're just to introduce briefly Leaders for Climate Action. We're Europe's biggest climate action community. We help companies go from awareness to action, focus on the right thing, and learn from each other just to build a bridge to what Liliana was saying. And just to complement a little bit to what you're saying, I really love what you're doing because I don't think there's a difference between top down and bottom up. Both of those forces need to work together. So we work very much with when we onboard companies, when we invite them to our community, we want to make sure that leaders commit authentically, personally, to taking climate action, which then translates into business decisions. Just like with the role of sustainability department is to make themselves redundant in the long term, so sustainability is embraced in the core of the business. We're going to make sure that it starts at the very, very heart of we plant the seed in the core of the business. And as far as KPIs are concerned, we work a lot with small and medium companies, and the challenge there is a little bit different. So how do you actually combine sustainability and tactical goals? How do you set OKRs, something that pushes the entire organization towards sustainability on a tactical, regular level? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to enable this change in the heart of the business, and we're trying to make sure that action is being taken in the short term, not in the long term, because there's plenty of pledges being thrown around, right? 2020, 2030, 2050. And actually what really matters is taking ambitious action in collaboration with as many stakeholders as possible, including our employees, including our suppliers, today, right now, because we don't have the time for the learning.
Thank you. When you're thinking about this way of changing organizations and being inspired from each other, my personal take on that, and I've been going through some stages from very free organizations to very, very process-oriented organizations with all the pros and cons of both sides. Which sort of company, and I leave it to you, probably you can answer from the corporate perspective, but it's a question to all of you. We have examples, like you probably know Frédéric Laloux and his book Reinventing Organizations. One of the examples is the Buurtzorg, who got rid of their KPI because they were just harmful. Right? And say, okay, this intrinsic motivation of all this, I want to work with people that need help, it is so strong that we leave it up to them to decide. Right? Then we have very innovative companies such as Salesforce. No, it is Spotify with the tribes, where you gather. Are you doing this? Are you changing ways of making decisions completely in your organization? Are you planning to do this? Where are you in 10 years from now?
Yeah, it's in a big public company also, it's cultural change. Takes time. It's interesting because we've used both what you're saying, in terms of bottom up and top down also decision. And we did last year a consultation on all our employees. What are the actions that you think we should undergo as a company, and we highlighted the 10 most voted actions that we actually implemented in our roadmap in terms of employee contribution, such as committing to specific causes. So we did that consultation. But I think with the purpose-led status, what really helped us is that those objectives that are again in our legal status, we have declined them into specific objectives really linked to the business. And I totally agree with, and also what I say to the team is that we're working so that at some point we should disappear, but it's going to take a little bit of time until we disappear. But all of the departments have specific business objectives linked to the big 3 objectives. And we, in the sustainability department, we've worked with each department in order to make sure that those objectives are really specified to them. And then obviously remuneration is linked to those objectives, and both individual remuneration and also collective remuneration at La Banque Postale is linked to specific sustainability KPIs.
Okay, and to the second part of the question, when you see, it doesn't have to be very specific, but if you are looking at, because it's about carbon reduce business and really getting a grip on what does it mean to have a regenerative economy, where automatically these things that we saw early on in Lubomira's presentation do not happen anymore because they don't make sense. Also on a balance sheet side, what would it look like for you, just from the perspective now, from your position, from your bank, from your organization?
Yeah, what's interesting in this concept of regenerative economy is that you're trying to, have a positive impact and not just, as you said, Lubomira, exploit the resources. What is fascinating with the role of the bank is that, we have a double role. We have the role as a company, and we have our operational, what we call our operational carbon footprint. So as any service company, we need also to reduce this carbon footprint. But more importantly, we are at the heart of the economy because basically we provide credit to retail people to buy their home, their cars, to corporates to build, their production facilities. And so by this role, we have a very, we are an important driver of, how the economy can change because of, the financing capabilities that we have. So maybe I would take two examples. In terms of what we're doing for the retail people, we have this new product that is helping low-income people to finance renovation on their buildings. And so, after you get a couple of subsidies to renovate your buildings, but sometimes you still have an outstanding amount. So this specific loan is dedicated to renovate your buildings. So it creates environmental impact because basically, you have a building that is more energy efficient. It creates a social impact because it's dedicated to a certain low-income population. And it also creates economic performance because at the end of the day, the building that you renovate will generate value. And the beauty of this financial innovation is that people only reimburse the principal of the loan when they sell the building. So they don't have to make the reimbursement on a monthly basis. So that's the kind of innovation that bank can make to create an impact.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Then we have again the question: how does this reflect in your balance sheet? Does it have to reflect in your balance sheet? It might be a lot less profitable than other activities, and there's that possibility of reflecting this. I would like to come to this later if we have the time. I would like to know from the leaders that you present here for climate action. What are the examples that you see that are already out there, not with corporates, but with smaller companies? And also, please don't hold back, and you too later, with mistakes that have been made, that you made as well, and that we should not repeat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think when it comes to role of small and medium companies, we should not forget it's 99% of companies out there, right? So that's 50% of Europeans' GDP. So it's a really a big sector that also requires a lot of help because SMEs they don't have many resources. Really, the power is just going back to Lubomira is in collaboration. So bringing together industry sectoral coalitions, specifically e-commerce companies, for instance, working together on sustainable packaging instead of doing it individually. Same thing with e-mobility companies. It's organizations such as Too Good To Go, which it's an app that fights food waste, pushing for policy change in France and trying to redefine the understanding of what best before means, which accounts for 10% of global emissions. So really, these type of initiatives, when you bring together various stakeholders, is what those smaller companies can initiate.
And from a perspective that stuff that you have tried or companies have tried, like, okay, let's do this. For example, cooperation. Let's take this example. I love cooperation, and I have the experience in my own life that I was just so lucky to, as an entrepreneur, to keep my liberty and decide whatever I want. And very often it did not make sense economically for me. But I just did it because it felt good, right? It felt right. A company does not have to write. A public company not at all, because they have to report to their shareholders, right? But most companies don't have the right to, or the leaders, to decide whatever they want economically. So from this point of view, stuff that was done and abandoned. We talked about this before. I know a company, bigger, medium-sized company that created a corporate fund that worked pretty well, hired really good people, and then their balance sheet was not that good 1 year. Yeah, and they said, okay, what is weighing heavy on our balance sheet? Oh, this, stop it. And that was gone from one day to another. Other examples that did not work and how they could better work.
But I absolutely agree. But I would take issue with looking at the waste potential. I would look at. So we've created a myth a little bit that the role of business is to maximize profit and look at balance sheets. And it's part creation. It's a social construct. I think we can also look at it from the point of view of the opportunity that business has, the opportunity that business with being a force for good can have on challenges such as climate, or even more broadly ecosystem degradation and helping us shepherd towards the regenerative economy. And if we look at it from that point of view, I think it's fantastic that business takes the lead, that experiments, and there's going to be definitely plenty of waste along the way. It's the same thing with social entrepreneurship sector, for instance. But again, I would love for business to take more ownership of the issue because we've been relying historically on governments, multilaterals, and issues are rising. We don't have that much time left. We really need much more.
I couldn't agree more. It's just that I always have my doubts that we have the right incentives out there. And wouldn't it be a great incentive, Tuno, if each and every single one of us here could just decide to work or not to work for a company, and with this freedom be much more powerful also in our decisions to take action within an organization. What I mean is very simple: a universal income. What do you think of that?
I think at the first point, before I might add something on universal income, is that I think you can see already today that there are way more effects than what the profits bring at the end of the company. I mean, you have things, for instance, like talent. Where does talent want to go? Does it want to go to the company that makes the most profit, or they have the most purpose? And then what happens when the most talented people start going to the companies, working for the companies that are only interested in their shareholders, filling their shareholders' pockets, right? So I think shareholders are also getting much smarter, demanding much more. I mean, we look at ESG funds, etc., from companies and just to maximize profit. So I think we're slowly starting to see that there's movements happening there. And yes, it would be great if we would also account for externalities in the balance sheet and say, okay, the cost of carbon emission right now is this much, and that's a minus, right? And that is not a profit that you're making. Other kind of positive impacts would also be great to be represented. So I think the question of maximizing profits is slowly changing, hopefully much faster soon. And I think universal income would be great for spurring more creativity, giving people much more time to create great things that don't have to be sold maybe, and contribute to way more knowledge. But yeah, it's a very complex topic.
Absolutely it is. But we heard it before. It is like that, and we have to think on all these levels, right? And that's why I want to hear from you what you have the experience more than I have. What is your take? Where are the key factors that we can work on? It's impossible. As an entrepreneur, I know it's impossible to focus on everything. It's not possible. So what do we have to focus on? Is it something like the universal income? Is it something like a different regulatory framework? Is it something like the EIB? We just heard them in the other panel, can, with their financial power, influence businesses in a certain way. You're more from the corporate and public sector. We only have 2 minutes left. What is like the key factors that we might focus on from your experience?
Yeah, I think, and also relating to what Lubomir has said in terms of cooperation, what is interesting is also how industries can work together in order to tackle those issues. And we at La Banque Postale, we're part of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, which is the alliance of global banks that have committed to carbon neutrality. And as part of the steering group, we're trying to lead industry practices so that, at some point, everyone adopt the same practices and we all, work towards the same goal. And in this idea also of maximization of profit, etc., what really helps in the financing industry is regulation, and regulation is starting to integrate climate risk in particular into the prudential regulation, and that's a great thing for top management, to tackle those issues and take that into account, because that's an investment for anywhere, something that they're going to have to do because regulation is going to ask them that.
All right, so let's take that away. When I try to sum it up a little bit. So, in terms of profit-oriented companies, we are going, in order to get it done, from short-term to long-term. In terms of working environment within the companies, but also in between all these organizations, we need to go into collaborative behavior, collaborative culture. And last but not least, we have to take into account all the external factors. So if we have a destructive supply chain, it doesn't show in our balance sheet at all, does it? Right? So we need that to be internalized in our balance sheet, and this is part of the regulations, isn't it? So that's my take on that. Thank you very, very much for your inspiration. Thank you for being here. And I hope this was a little bit of inspiration for many, many companies out there. You are the experts. Get in touch. Thank you so much. So this panel is not over yet. We do have our last guest, and I would really like to touch on many points that we just discussed about balance sheet, about the goals, about the KPIs. What is the meaning of a company? We're one of the biggest and most influential companies in the world, which is Google. And I welcome Alan Ellman, who is the head of sustainability at Google. Take a seat. This is our table. So thank you for being here, Adam. We have a load of inspiration from Lumumilla and from the panel that we can touch. Loads of points that they can touch. But first, please tell us just in a few words what is your position at Google? What does the organization look like? What does head of sustainability do at Google?
Fantastic. Well, first of all, I don't know about anybody else, but it's fantastic being back at sort of face-to-face events, and I'm certainly coming away from today like energized, and can't get back to the office to start sharing that energy. So thanks very much to the team for organising, and thanks for everyone for coming to this session. So to your question, so I'm responsible for sustainability at Google across our EMEA region, so Europe, Middle East and Africa. I'm part of our global sustainability team. I've been working in the sustainability space about 17 years now, long before people thought it was a cool job to do, but it's great to see how that's really changed over that time. And in terms of my work at Google, I really work right across all the teams to bring people together, to provide support in terms of pushing forwards our agenda. And I'm also very privileged that I get to come to events like this and meet with policymakers to try and really share what we're doing. And that's important because actually we don't have all the answers, and a lot of what we do is in partnership with others and trying to figure out who we can work with and how we can move things forward together. The way that we really think about this now, Google has had sustainability as a value really since its founding 20 plus years ago. And we try and integrate sustainability into everything we do. It's not about the sustainability team, it's about everybody at Google integrating sustainability into their job every day as part of their job. And we really think about sustainability in sort of three key pillars. So the first pillar for us is around what we call leading at Google. This is about our own operations, and maybe we can dive into some detail around that. Our second pillar is around how we enable partners, and partners being It could be large corporates, it could be governments, it could be cities. Equally, it could be NGOs. And we think we have both a responsibility but an opportunity here to really help others. And finally, we want to enable everyone. How can everyone that uses Google tools, how can we help them make more sustainable choices? And we have a range of goals and things that really sort of underpin each one of those focus areas.
All right, let's really dive into that. As Google is, of course, and I always has been an innovative company, but we were all overwhelmed how Google developed in the last 20 years. And Google created the slogan, I remember very well, "Don't be evil," like 20 years or more ago. Then still, many of us perceive Google not that much like that anymore, as Google is taking a big place in every single life of everybody. And this, with great power comes great responsibility, of course. Do you see, like, how do you see your organization? Isn't it a little bit like, there has been public TV before. Germany is a good example, right? Public TV has been predominant for decades and decades, and they had the written goal that they have to educate the population. Right? This is gone. It's almost not there anymore. It has been replaced by many other players, and one of which is very important is Google. So, do you see your role? How do you see your role? As like educator, how do you place yourself between public organizations and the SMEs we were just talking about? What's your responsibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have an opportunity and responsibility across all of those different aspects. But maybe it's worth, as I say, starting with what we do about ourselves and then how we can really be a partner and enabler for others. So Google's actually been on this journey, sustainability journey, as I say, since its founding. We're actually now in our third decade of climate action. So by 2007, the business really wanted to take a leadership position, and at that point we compensated for all of our operational carbon emissions with carbon offsets. We were the first major company back in 2007 to be carbon neutral in our operations. Now, by no means a perfect solution, but it was the best tools available to the business at the time, and something to really start the journey. Over the next decade, the business focused very heavily on decarbonisation and very specifically around renewable energy. And by 2017, we matched 100% of our energy, our electricity use, with renewable electricity on an annual basis. And we've done so every year since. We're actually the largest buyer of renewable electricity on an annual basis globally, and it's an area we continue to focus on. But whilst that was good progress, again, for us it was never enough, and we've now entered our third decade of climate action. And we've set two really big moonshot goals. The first is to be net zero emissions by 2030, and that's across our operations and across our value chain. So that's upstream and downstream, and this means we have a responsibility and opportunity, as I say, to really work with others and to really help decarbonise right up and down the value chain. And our second goal within that is to move to what we call 24/7 carbon-free energy. So as I mentioned before, we already use 100% renewable electricity, but what that generally means is we, at the end of the year, make sure that for all the electricity we've used, we've bought the same amount of renewable electricity. That doesn't mean in every data center or in every office at every day of the year, we're actually using renewable energy locally at the time we use it. And we don't think that's good enough. So we are going to move to a point where we're using energy on the local grids at the point we're using it within that hour. Now, a few years ago, that was something we didn't think was possible. We still don't know exactly how we're going to do it, but we're committed to achieving that by 2030. We are already 2/3 of the way there. We have 5 of our data centers, a number of them in Europe, already operating at 90% carbon-free energy. And we're building a coalition around that. And there is a compact which we've set up in partnership with the UN. We've had the federal state in the US sign up for it, and we've had many other companies, including other tech companies like Microsoft. And that's fantastic, because this isn't about any one business going alone. This is about everybody coming on this journey, enabling it to go quicker, enabling everyone to really decarbonise in the way that we need to. Because this is the decisive decade. We have to halve our emissions by 2030 as a planet.
Absolutely. You're touching on a very important point. my personal take on the whole IT industry is that who else could be the leader? It's more difficult for any other industry to decarbonize, right? We can do this in the same industry. We can do this easier, right? Steel has a hard time, but they have to do it as well. And now we're coming to this point where you are a leader in some of these or many of these activities, and you are the worldwide company that can enable others. How do you do this? What are examples that you can do? What do you want to accelerate? And again, what did you maybe try in the past that did not work out and you had to adapt? But give us some examples of how do you enable others?
I think some of my colleagues were challenged whether or not it's easy to achieve some of this, but
it's not easy, but
you can come and help us. But no, well, maybe I'll talk first of all about how we're supporting partners. And as I said earlier, we think of partners in many different ways. So maybe if I start by thinking about partners like NGOs here, and there are many different examples I could give, but I'll focus on something we ran a couple of years ago called the Global Impact Challenge on Carbon and Climate Change, and basically where we said we will give out funding to NGOs to really scale up these solutions, because we do need to scale them up, and as I say, Google certainly doesn't have all of the answers here. And we funded a number of different projects, and we funded them both financially, but with also what we call Google Fellows, so engineers and other Google experts who will give up 6 months of their time and go and work and help these organisations. And maybe just to give two examples of companies that were funded. One, we worked with a company called Normative on a carbon calculator specifically aimed for small and medium companies. Now, small and medium companies make up 90% of business, and actually often don't have the resources and the capability to go on the journey which they need to in the same way as every part of society. And so we've helped develop a free carbon calculator. It sits on the SME Climate Hub backed by the UN. As I say, it's free to use. It uses AI and ML to help, as I say, these companies calculate their emissions and then access information, education to then go on their carbon journey. And we funded them with €1 million, and as I say, 12 Google Fellows worked with them for 6 months. Another example is a NGO called Open Food Facts, who's all about using AI to understand the health and climate and sustainability aspects of food products, and really do that in a way which can scale up to 500,000, 1 million products. And again, we've worked with them, and that enables everybody to use the tool to get access to those information, just scan products and get information to health and sustainability. So that's sort of how a couple of examples of how we've helped NGOs. But one area we focus on a lot is working with cities. Cities make up 70% of global emissions, so they are a key enabler in terms of going on this journey. And one of the things we're able to do is bring Google expertise in terms of big data, analytics. We have petabytes worth of data, and we also have geospatial expertise through Earth Engine. And so we have a tool called the Environmental Insights Explorer. It covers now 40,000 cities and areas around the globe, and we make that available to those cities, and that provides them a range of information to help set their climate agenda and work on their plans. So that might be giving them information about their building emissions. It might be giving them transport information. So we're able to look at what transportation's coming into a city, what's going out of a city, how transportation's moving around the city. So, for example, Dublin are using that information to think about how they improve cycling in the city using real-world information.
That's an important point. In fact, you already answered one of my other questions. How are you driving infrastructure? You talk a lot about infrastructure, right? That brings me to 2 points. One is internally. How do you make these decisions? So based on which incentives from Google? These are all good examples. How did you come to these decisions? What is your incentive as a company to do so? That would be very interesting to learn when you were talking about the regenerative balance sheet. It would be great to have it on the balance sheet. How do you work? What drives your decisions for these decarbonization decisions?
I think the first thing to say it's very much a cultural thing. As I say, it's been a value of the business ever since its founding, and people want to come and work at Google so that actually they can drive this agenda. But I think business is waking up to the fact that this isn't a nice to do. This is something that businesses have to do. Investors are demanding it. As I say, people want to work at businesses, so if you want to attract new talent, if you want to retain talent, you need to be taking the agenda very seriously. Customers are increasingly making their choices and thinking about sustainability in terms of who they buy from and what services they use. And we're seeing global supply chains being disrupted by sustainability. We're seeing an energy crisis today. So I think businesses need to see this as absolutely critical to run successful businesses. As I say, at Google, we see it as a responsibility and an opportunity. I mentioned earlier, one of the areas of focus we have is enabling everyone. We're privileged that we have billions of users that use Google tools, and we're able to help people make more sustainable choices. So, give you a number of examples. If you use Google Maps, we now give information about how you can access scooters or access bikes for hire. We are working on, and will launch later this year, something called eco-routing. So if you do need to drive, we won't just tell you how you get from point A to point B, we will tell you the most eco-efficient route to do that. And we believe that will take and save enough carbon equivalent to 200,000 vehicles off the road. We also have hardware devices like Nest. Our Nest, which is our learning thermostat, has already saved 100 billion kilowatt hours of energy. That's enough to light the entire planet for 10 days. So the more we can make it really easy and be helpful for people to make sustainable choices, we think is good for the planet, it's great for our customers, and it's good for our business.
But wouldn't it be nice if this was reflected? Maybe we're going to a financial crisis in the next 12 months, and then decisions might be once again based more on short-term deals. Would be nice if this was reflected more in your core profits that you account for in your business, and let's take the overarching picture. Does your innovative company and innovative corporate, you're a really big company, develop something like that there's not that this is one consistent system where what you do is telling gets right on the positive side of the balance sheet? Are you getting there? Can you help others to make nice decisions?
Yeah, look, I think it's a great question, and I think to your point, it's a worry if companies are investing in this when the times are good, but not when times aren't.
Absolutely.
But I think it's also important, as I say, not to look through that literal finance lens. I think there are many other risks and opportunities that companies have to think about and embed within how they run their business. And that was my point earlier around we embed sustainability into everything we do. We've also set very big, very large public goals, and we are held to account for those goals, and we have to think about, therefore, how everything we do is about meeting those bold, ambitious goals. So we can't walk away from them, but we also believe they're going to make us a better business. They're going to make us a stronger and more resilient business. We think as I say, we can be helpful to millions of users. And we have an opportunity to partner with governments, with cities, and big businesses to help them on their journey as well. So I think you're absolutely right. People organizations need to think about the real value of this, but I think it is beyond just a balance sheet.
Yeah. So let's conclude this balance sheet question just with this fact that it would be great if it was included, then it would automatically work in the right direction, and couldn't be cut off for some very short-term goals, right? To conclude, I would like you to give us a little bit insight of how you are working with public organizations, with governments or regions or whatever, and how are you working with the regulative environment, which plays a big role, for example, if you're talking about scooters, mobility in general?
Well, I think maybe rather than talk about, because I think I've given some examples on cities and governments, but we very much take, say the technology that we give away in those circumstances and also bring those to enterprise customers as well. So maybe just give one example and bring that to life. We've been working with Unilever. Unilever has set big ambitious goals around palm oil, making sure that they don't source palm oil, they've got deforestation-free palm oil, and that's fantastic. But palm oil supply chains, like many other raw materials, are very difficult to track and monitor. As I mentioned, we are able to track that from the sky and bring AI to that and really see what's happening on the ground. So we're working with them, it's been very successful, and they're looking at rolling that out to other commodities as well.
Okay.
So, a real example about how that is being brought to life, enabling others.
So that's a great way to finalize this. I think that what we can do, and I take your word, right? You are helping all these organizations, companies, consumers, and also governments to take action. So please make it done. Help you, right? That's what you just promised.
Everything here is about partnership. As I said earlier, people can't do this alone. A lot of what we do is working with partners to come on the journey with us, whether that's helping us with information, partners developing new technology. And as we discussed earlier, this isn't about going alone. This is about how we raise the bar for everyone, how we can speed up everyone, because we will go so much faster if we go on this journey together. So, partnerships, collaborations, being open is so important for us all to succeed.
All right, I think that's SDG 17. Okay, thank you so much. That was a great final words for this session. Cooperation is the way we have to go. Thank you.